So we've heard a lot less, Vicky, of the Mercers than we have, I guess, some other Republican stalwarts. Sheldon Adelson makes a little cameo in your piece. Of course, the Koch brothers. There are others.
Right.
But give us a sense of when we talk about the Mercers, who are we talking about specifically from that family, and how long have they been this involved in Republican/conservative politics, I guess, / media?
Right. So, people outside of the Republican world, the name Mercer is very new, right? We've all heard of the Kochs and Sheldon Adelson. They've been around Republican politics for a long time. The Mercers matter in this context. That the two Mercers who matter are Robert Mercer, the 70-year-old former computer scientist who, in his 50s, became a very, very, very wealthy and successful hedge fund financier at a place called Renaissance Technologies, which is known for being a very sort of anti-establishment hedge fund. They typically don't recruit from Wall Street. They want different kinds of brains, and they've had extraordinarily good returns, and the sort of the algorithms and the data, how they use data is all kept very secret. And it's quite a mysterious place. He's the one who has all the money. He then has a wife and 3 daughters. And the middle daughter, Rebecca Mercer, who's 43 years old and very tall and sort of striking looking, is much more articulate than her father, who is famously sort of reclusive. He much prefers talking to cats than to humans. And he has long held very, very right-wing views. He's told people at inside this hedge fund that he really believes that people who don't earn very much money, he doesn't sort of see them as worthwhile people. They don't add anything to society. They're a kind of negative, and I think nobody who heard these views thought, sort of took them seriously until 2010. And in January 2010, the Citizens United decision gets passed, which, of course, changes the political landscape completely, because it means that individuals are now allowed to, they can spend unlimited amounts of money on candidates and political think tanks and causes. And Bob Murphy uses, and this is when Rebecca, the middle daughter, who's, I think got 3 or 4 degrees from Stanford and spent a few years trading at her father's firm, but she's basically a housewife living in New York with who she homeschools her 4 children. So she has the time on her hands. They started to attend the Freedom Summits put together by the Kochs, who back then were the sort of linchpin of all these conservative mega donors. But I think they began, Rebecca, who is the talker of the two, felt increasingly frustrated that they were not sufficiently tough on trade and immigration. She also felt very annoyed that sort of she wasn't being listened to. And she really started to make a name for herself when Mitt Romney lost in 2012.
All right, Vicky, let me stop you there. Vicky, let me just stop you there and back up just a little bit, because, it's interesting. So we have this reclusive guy who clearly does not sound like he's the type of person to set up some broad-based network. But when the shackles come off, where your own personal wealth is really all you need to sort of qualify
Right.
as a political player. He begins to blossom. He does this through his daughter, Rebecca, who seems to function as his surrogate in some way. But do we have a sense of I mean, where do they come from? Are they from New York? Do they live in New York City? Where did what do we know about Robert Mercer's childhood or where he came from? I mean, because clearly these guys are movement conservatives, and they end up, I guess, around this time in 2010. Donating is probably the wrong word, or perhaps it's not, investing in Breitbart, which I am particularly interested in.
2011. Yeah.
I'm particularly. Let me just.
Yeah, they start to see what their money can do. Yeah, and then they start to invest in these platforms. Breitbart was the first with the media platform, and then they buy this data analytics company to see if that will make a difference.
How did they choose Breitbart? How did they choose Breitbart? I mean, I asked this because I, at that time, followed Breitbart, the site and the man, quite closely, and that site was not making any money. And I remember when that secret, essentially, investment came in. I mean, I've looked at the filings over the years, and it was unclear where this money came in, but it came in one big lump sum, and he was ready to revamp the whole thing right before he died. But how did they just decide Breitbart? Was it just simply his politics? Because the interesting thing about Breitbart is, at that time, Breitbart was not at all interested, it seemed to me, in policy as much as he was sort of a cultural aggrievement.
Culture. That's exactly, Sam. You're exactly right. And this is where you've hit the nail on the head. So that's exactly right. Andrew Breitbart was interested in changing the culture. He wanted, he was as obsessed with changing Hollywood as he was with everyone, everything else. And I think so right there, that's what makes the Mercers. You asked me at the beginning, what makes the Mercers different? Okay? It's because they really want to blow up the entire system of American politics so that Americans, in their view, can regain its cultural roots, which they believe it has completely lost. They are terrified that America is becoming dangerously close to a sort of socialist Europe, and the Americas they want restored is the sort of competition, enterprise, and they believe that the only sort of way, having watched the Mitt Romney campaign lose, I think they believe that there's going to be a multi-pronged attack. Breitbart is one way to really hit the culture, okay? And after Andrew died, one of the reasons they then really trusted Steve Bannon, who took it over, was that, Steve Bannon is a former Goldman Sachs banker, and he did really help right that ship financially. I mean, obviously he had their money, but it was a bit of a, I think it was much more precarious when Andrew was alive. He also, Steve Bannon, as we know, is this extraordinary populist, and he created it into a vehicle with a much more populist, widespread appeal. So that was right up what the Mercers wanted to do. But the other way, I think they really felt they needed to completely blow up. They just sort of thought the way Washington has been doing business needed to be exploded. And after Mitt Romney lost, Rebecca gave this speech saying that it was, she really thought done a terrible job in terms of data and canvassing. And what's quite interesting, though, is her father then went out and bought, basically an English data analytics company.
Vicky, let's take a break right there.
Branch.
Vicky, we've got to take a break right there. When we come back,
okay.
I want to hear more about this data enterprise that the Mercers went out to buy, and how much of that was a function of applying it to politics, and how much was it a function of their business, or both. Talk a little bit more about how they ended up becoming essentially the one of the primary benefactors to the Trump campaign. We got to take a quick break. I'm talking to Vicky Ward. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio.